Nelson City Council's Governance Committee. We have an apology from His Worship the Mayor, otherwise all present. Someone like to move that Her Worship the Mayor's apology be sustained? Councillor Courtney, seconded by Councillor Noonan. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Item 2 on the agenda is confirmation of business. There is no alteration to the order of business which is in our agendas. As usual, I will ask, has any member of the committee got anything on the agenda in which they have an interest, which should be declared or included on the interests register? There being none.
Yeah, I'm a friend of the Cedar too, friend of the Bishop Cedar. I'm on there. Just an interest rather than a...
Right. You're a financial member?
I am actually.
Yeah. We'll note that interest. Item 4, public forum. I have had no indication of anyone wanting to speak to the public forum, and I think all of the people in the gallery have registered for the one item which relates to the suitor, so they're going to get their say in that. So there is no public forum today. Item 5 is the confirmation of minutes. There was a meeting held on the 9th of March. It's on pages 8 to 21. They have been circulated. I'll run through them page by page. If there are any corrections or alterations that people wish to highlight, I'll make a couple of comments as we go through. Item number 4, which was the public forum item in the last agenda. I wondered why the item was not on the status report. I inquired when I saw the draft agenda, and it's going to be on a subcommittee's agenda in the status report, therefore follow up by that committee. Councillor Rutledge, I noticed, had done some checking once he got the agenda, but that's why it's not on the agenda. It's not on our status report today.
Mr. Chair, given that it says the report to be prepared for the Governance Committee, can you explain how it's ended up in that other committee?
I think it's simply, Councillor Rutledge, the fact that the delegations for the committees, as you know, when this committee met on the last occasion, there were at that time no set committees. The delegations for those committees are now in force, those committees are in place, and that is where the item is going to be considered. Okay. Page 10, page 11, page 12. I note here that we're going to have a workshop on the 11th of, we've had the workshop on the 11th of April, I should say. Page 13, page 14, page 15.
Yeah.
Yes, Councillor Courtney and Councillor Noonan. Councillor Courtney.
Mr. Chair, my request really is on page not 15 but over. It's still to do with item 14, tendering processes, and you go to the bottom of page 16 in the notes there, and it says that the full scope of this report, this is the report, this external report into the tendering process that we've called for, will be agreed, the scope of this report will be agreed in advance by the Chair, that's yourself, and Mr. Peters. Now, Mr. Chair, I have no problem with that. I hold you and Mr. Peters in high regard, but I myself personally would appreciate perhaps receiving a draft of that scope of this report that we're requesting, this external report, and I think other councillors probably would too. I think it's the crux of the matter. I think it's it's critical to the whole report, what it's based on, what the scope is. So if that could be circulated, a draft scope, I would appreciate it.
Councillor Courtney, Mr. Peters and I are yet to complete this matter, so as we do that, we'll keep you informed. Councillor Noonan.
Well, thank you. I've got two items, but one relates to what Councillor Courtney was just mentioning. There's no notification on that as to where that report...
On what?
On the item 14, yes. Thank you. There's nothing on this. I'm wondering where that's going to go to. Who's going to be reporting back And where is it going to be reporting back to?
Yeah, I thought so, yeah. As with the earlier item that we just discussed, it fits into the same hiatus in terms of the committees not being in existence at the last committee. The report from Mr. Peters and myself, or the scope that we produce, will be going to the Audit, Risk and Finance Committee.
Can we have in the minutes of this meeting that is where that is going to go to, and for the other items, since there is no slot for them to go into,
Big
so
pardon?
that we can follow where it's gone to? I'd like it noted in the minutes of this meeting that that's where those items are going to be reported to.
Okay, we can do that.
And I have one other question.
Right.
Relating to the insurance renewal, and it's similar, because it's not on this.
Item number?
13, the insurance renewal.
Yes.
Again, because that's not on this status report, which is coming up, same thing applies, that once it goes from here, it disappears. And I want to know where it's going to be reported back to.
It will not disappear.
The
and
paper
it is
trail
not yet
is hard
completed.
for councillors to follow, is
we
more the
haven't
point
we
of-
haven't completed it yet, and again it'll be going to, on this occasion, to I believe the commercial committee. Is that right? Commercial? No, Audit, Risk and Finance.
Right, so I'd also say on the minutes of this meeting is that when that item comes, it's going to be reported through that committee, just so that the paper trail works for us.
Yeah, that's fine. I
Thank
think we'll show in the records exactly what happened by recording these in the minutes, and future readers of the minutes will understand where it is. And please, all those that are interested, attend those subcommittee minutes and take it to the next step. I've gone now to page 16, page 17, page 18, page 19, 20 and 21.
We have one other item which I raised at the time that the unconfirmed minutes came through to council, and that's just the wording that reports back on item 14, the tendering process.
Page number?
Page number 17, in the top, in the third line, it talks about focusing on protecting officers and elected members, and I just think the terminology of that might mean more than what the intent was, and I think it was more about educating rather than protecting. Protecting looks like we're covering, whereas educating means that we need to learn from it. So just wondered whether you could do some, I think I emailed you about that one earlier.
Yes.
Might want to get a feel from the meeting on that.
Yeah, I think, I personally, I have no problem with making that minor amendment to the minutes to get the correct nature and feeling of the meeting, and not to give a incorrect steer or message. So, the meeting happy to change in the minutes the word protecting to informing. Informing. Everyone happy on that? Okay. With that minor amendment, I'll ask someone to move that the minutes be confirmed as a true and correct record. Moved by Councillor Dahlberg, Deputy Chair, and seconded by Councillor Courtney. No further discussion, I'll put it. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against, no. Carried. We move now to the status report, which is item number 6 on pages 22 and 23. Someone move that the report be received. Question, Councillor Rutledge.
I understand that the gondola committee have reported back some time ago, and I'm actually wondering, instead of it just sort of saying ongoing, I'm wondering when it's going to come back to the relevant committee to have a bit of a look at what the preliminary findings are, and when we're going to find out what's going on this one.
I've seen a preliminary report myself from the organisation, but I'll have to check with Nikki. You know, Is it next governance committee we're looking to have this?
Yeah, we really.
Next governance committee?
No, we can't say that because it's really in the hands of them and how long it takes to do the work. But they're keeping us closely informed, as you can see from that draft.
Right. Well, Nikki just advised that it's impossible to say yet when they will have their final report. They're still working on it. They're keeping staff informed, and I would hope that it'll be at the next governance committee.
I can give them an indication that that's the wish.
Yeah, and Nikki's indicated that she will convey the committee's wish, if possible, to have it here for the next governance committee meeting.
Could we have that noted, please?
I don't think we need to do that. We will make that happen. Councillor Skinner.
Yeah, just like to comment. It's interesting to keep track of it, being that we've given them some money, and if they're doing their part on being qualified for any more of that money, which is part of the bundle to be given to them. But I just remind public and councillors, this is a private concern, a private organisation, and it's not a council project. And I get a lot of public asking me, when are you guys going ahead with a gondola? And I have to remind people this is a public organisation, private organisation, a private venture. The council are not involved in this venture apart giving a bit of a helping hand to get a feasibility study off the ground.
Yes, that's correct. That's basically correct, Councillor Skinner. Councillor Matheson.
Yeah, just a quick note on that status report on the very same subject. I see that the meeting date was nearly a year ago. It seems to have taken some considerable time.
One would agree. It's taken considerable time.
Well, I think someone
could maybe indicate that it's not an easy task.
I think, Mr. Chair, that we should quite rightly tell them to get themselves their act together and get back to us as soon as possible. This is just going to go on and on.
We will ensure that the feeling of the committee today will be conveyed to the private members who are attempting to make this thing happen, and hopefully we'll have it here, as I say, if they listen to what we've said at the next meeting. Councillor Dalberg.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd say two questions. One was on the insurance renewal, infrastructure assets, and that was carried through. It's not actually in the status report. Do we know what's that's up to?
But it goes through different status reports.
As indicated earlier, it's to be going to the Audit, Risk and Finance.
So it'll
So
change?
it moves to their status
Okay, so that's another one then we'll need to tag where it's going to while we adjust. Thank you.
Yep. Any further questions? I'll ask someone to move the report be received. Councillor Noonan, and seconded by Councillor Rutledge. It's open for discussion, if any. There being none, I'll put it. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, no. Carried. Now it's my pleasure to welcome to the table Mr. Craig Potton, Julie Catchpole and John Hamilton, and those that accompany you. We note that we've got Jane Defoe, Gabriel Hervey and Julie Waller, Joe Waller here. So welcome to you guys as well. So today's report, which is on pages 24 to 27, was prepared by Mr. Chris Ward, who, as we know, is overseas at the moment, so he's going to be deputised by the Chief Executive. Would like to join the table, please, Chief Executive, and present the report. Please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If I could start by asking members here today to note that the heading on page 24 is a little bit in advance in terms of time frame. It is the half-yearly report to 31 December 2016, not 2017.
I'm happy to consider the report taken as read at this stage and ask the Suitor Trust to do their presentation, unless you would like me to highlight points at this point in time, Mr. Chair.
I was thinking of taking questions on the report first, and then maybe it'd be best to have the presentation. I was intending to take questions direct to you at this stage on the report, but in consideration of the fact that the authors of the main reports are here, we'll hear their presentation first and view it if it's on view, and then we'll, if you can stay at the table, Chief Executive, we'll put questions to you as appropriate, or questions to the Suitor representatives. So fire ahead, folks. Is there? No.
Technical virtue. Go and put the plug back in. Just think, another year's time. Or we just...
I hope the Suitors, the new Suitors, IT systems and overhead systems and everything else are working spot on, without delays when they're switched on. And I also note that you're quite busy in hiring out your FOIA. In my district licensing committee role, I have to sign a number of approvals for functions to be held at the Suitor, and I hope that they're good income raising for you.
Would you comment on that too?
Here we go. So this presentation is a little bit looking back on the 6-month report and looking forward. So of course the highlight for us was the opening of the redeveloped Suitor, and this is a before and after picture. We opened on schedule at the beginning of October 2016 and within budget. So here's another before and after in the original gallery. And here, which you can't quite see, it says charges apply, and this was the before with the false ceiling now removed, the steps now removed. We've got universal access throughout, and this has been earthquake strengthened, and with all the latest technologies in it, and it is a beautiful result, I think. So we had a blessing and unveiling of the PO on the 31st of September. 1st of October we had the official opening with Her Excellency Dame Patsy Reddy, one of her first official duties in her new role as the Governor-General of New Zealand. The next day we... Oh, look at that. We're a bit ahead of ourselves. Well spotted. On the 2nd of October, where I have got the date right, we had a preview for Friends of the Suitor and the Nelson Suitor Art Society. They're cutting the cake there. And then the public opening at 11 AM, which was very popular and well attended. At the same time as we were preparing to move back to the Suitor, we wrote a book, No Pressure, which celebrates highlights of our collection, and I hope you've all bought a copy. Two of the authors are sitting here today. So the Suitor lives to its name, to Arotoio Whakatū, the pathway of art for the Nelson region, and these are just two details from the redevelopment. Two beautiful details. An important component of what we do is education, and at the moment we are supported with a grant from the Ministry of Education to provide learning experiences outside the classroom. And here you've got one of the first classes to use the new Suitor, and a class working with the PO in the foyer, which are a beautiful feature of our foyer. Upper Moutere doing a clay program in our new education room, which was something we didn't have before, was a dedicated space where you could do hands-on art making. This has been immensely popular since we've opened and very well used. Our educator, Esther, there is probably one of New Zealand's leading educators in an art gallery setting. She's doing a PhD at the moment on that. Glitterati, our chairperson, can attest to the to the love of glitter and being a parent helper. Making art matter, this is our vision, mission statement, and we're doing that both through learning experiences outside the classroom. After school classes, we do Suita Kids Club. We're just about to add one for teenagers in the next term 2 of this year. We do Thursday talks, and in future, probably later this year, we're looking to run more community education between us and the Nelson Suita Art Society, using the expertise amongst their members and our own expertise. Exhibitions, our 6-month review of course covers the time we're at Halifax Street as well as back in our new facility. This is an exhibition that was at Halifax Street, which proved to be a very good venue for the gallery. We operated there right until the beginning of September, and then we moved, which has to be a record, I think, for an art gallery to move back into a premises and open at the beginning of October. Here's one of our new exhibition spaces with one of our opening exhibitions celebrating works from our collection. And here's a view standing in the doorway between two of the galleries, the Hercus Gallery and the Potton Family Gallery to the right. Surprise visitor at Christmas, the Prime Minister and his family in the old gallery, and other distinguished visitors, the Minister for Arts, Culture and Heritage, coming to have a look at how their money had been spent from the Regional Museums Fund, looking at 2 artworks, some of the most valuable in the collection, the Apple Pickers, purchased through community fundraising, and a huge Toss Wollaston painting gifted to us. So that brings us to the collection. These are new acquisitions from this first 6 months of the year. Graham Bennett sculpture, which has got Boulder Bank stone in it. Leo Benjamin and a Nigel Brown. 2 of these works have been paid for from our 5x40 fund, which is all donations, significant donations, and this work was a gift from the artist. So the collection generally grows either by purchases, which the money for purchases comes from the acquisition fund, the 5x40, some bequests which we have invested, other bequests and specific donations made to purchase specific works. Most of our collection has been gifted, and we do receive gifts, but proposed gifts and purchases have to comply with the collection policy. And that collection policy is a limiter, if you like, on the growth of the collection. But these are some of the factors here that help us determine what we will collect. So quality and significance of the work, relationship to the rest of the collection, the condition, and ongoing care requirements. As, with our storeroom, as it says there, size matters. This is the largest painting in the collection. It's out on show at the moment. But this is showing our new storage system with the pull-out racks. And there's another view of the collection storeroom. So that storeroom has, well, it's state-of-the-art, climate control, fire detection, security systems. It's monitored 24 hours a day for temperature and relative humidity, and it has some room for growth in the collection because of these new systems, these movable racks, these are movable units. So all these systems have enhanced our storage capacity. Let's go back to here. Now there is a question in the order paper about insurance and the collection. Our greatest insurance costs are not actually related to the collection, and even if we never added another artwork to the collection grows in value because that's the nature of art. It generally appreciates in value, sometimes at different rates. I mean, there alone is, I shouldn't talk about values, but there's just under $1 million worth of art just in those images there at today's market. So visitors, I don't know if you can read this graph very well. This is opening, the orange line here, and so this, if you follow the orange through to the grey, that's visitors since opening, and then down here is comparison to a previous financial year. So we are striking visitors at a higher level than before. Free admission, it's been particularly well received by the public. We acknowledge the council in making that possible, and encourage people obviously to make a donation in our donation box, which is a kinetic donation box designed by local sculptor Derek Ball. We do notice that visitors from outside the region tend to be the most generous in putting money in the donation box, but in terms of locals, it encourages repeat visitation, and it makes the suitor accessible to all, and that's a really important thing for us, for our supporters, and in the design of the new gallery. And you'll see in the paper attached in your order paper, all New Zealand local authority supported galleries are free entry. So there's a sort of mindset also amongst New Zealanders that they would expect to get into a gallery for free. Promotion, we've been increasing use of social media. We renewed our website just before we opened, so it works on all platforms. We do rely a lot on word of mouth, and that's where the free admission has been a great help to us. We also promote ourselves in print and tourism media. We do have a very small budget though for promotion and advertising, and then we use other methods because we have supporter groups, Friends of the Suitor, the Legacy Group, which are the higher level donors, and we've now got a very active volunteer program. All of these are ambassadors for the suitor. And to help offset our operating costs, we have venue hire, as your chairperson mentioned, who's been to several occasions here. We've got the theatre, which now has disabled access and seating, the Jane Evans foyer, the education room, and we also have leases. There's partial lease on the theatre, and the cafe is leased. And here we've got our our volunteers in their livery, and they're a really important component of our visitor experience now. but by December they'd contributed over 1,200 hours to the suit. It's a huge difference, and they do a lot of activities. So here's just a few facts at a glance. May 31st, we will have been opened 118 years. We're open 7 days a week, 362 days of the year. And we are open, the galleries are open those hours, but actually the facilities often open a lot longer than that if there's things going on in the theatre or the foyer. To run all that, we've got 2 full-time staff and 8 part-time staff. We're pretty stretched resource-wise, and we're governed by the Trust Board, just about all of whom are here today except for Ian McClellan. So we're very proud of our new facility. Here's a lovely shot of the old and the new, but we have discovered, of course, once we're in there, that we do have some increased resourcing needs. The most obvious insurance, and that insurance principally relates to the building and of course the increased value of the building, and overheads that we can't really avoid, cleaning, energy, line costs, security, and salary and wages, as we need more customer service in this new facility. We want to achieve to the level of the quality of this building, which is fabulous resource for the region, and this is what we are. The suit are a destination. That's our marketing agenda going forward for the whole facility in its fabulous setting, a destination where art matters.
Thank you, Julie. Craig or John, do you want to add to the words?
Thank you, Chair. I think that's covered a good overview of it. We're absolutely delighted with our relationship with the City Council. As a local authority, you've got behind us at a time where we really did need that buy-in by the ratepayer and by the public, and you came to the party in a way that we are very, very appreciative of. Obviously, as Julie's suggested, success has bred its costs, so to speak, in the new building, which is totally wonderful. We've been on budget on that, but we've got to keep it running. We're still assessing what those costs are, as Julie has enunciated. Electricity insurance has gone up, of course, because of problems beyond the immediate area, but very much felt. I think they felt last night as well, and earthquakes, etc. So there are ongoing costs. We haven't fully assessed them. We are working with Chris Ward and others on trying to say, get a handle around them. But actually running the suitor, more security, more people, we're definitely a little underpersoned at present. We kind of echoed that this might happen to the Mayor and to other councillors over the last few years, and it's coming to fruition. The public are pouring in big numbers, and we have to deal with them. I guess what I would like to see, and what we would like to see as a board in the next few years, is that the suitor really becomes an art destination that is not only important to the people of the community here, but is a destination that draws people into Nelson. And as someone who loves nature and a conservationist, I'm always surprised that more people go to art galleries than national parks. More people go to art galleries than nature. This is a worldwide trend, and it's increasing faster than any other trend in tourism. So art is the fastest increasing tourist reason that people travel, which is marvellous and amazing for us. But we have to run a facility and have exhibitions that are of a quality that will compete with people who have more money, like the Gov at Brewster in New Plymouth. I mean, they are the provincial gallery that we, in a sense, pit ourselves against if you want to get competitive in a provincial sense. They run on a $3.2 million budget each year. We run on just on $500,000. I need not remind you the museum runs on considerably higher budget than us. So we're looking for small incremental increases in the areas that we've talked about, but we are looking for them so that we can have a destination that people, not only in Nelson, but from not only New Zealand, but also from overseas, can come Nelson is a place that's known for its art. You know, we've had Toss Williston here, McCann and Rita Angus, they came up to pick apples. That's what that painting's about, to make money. They reflected images back to us about the way we should see the land and the culture and the people here. So we're kind of born to entertain them. We're made to have a strong art gallery here. We appreciate your support. We're asking you for a little bit more. Thank you.
John, do you wish to add anything?
I'm probably quite comfortable at the moment. I'll certainly answer any questions. I think there's no question there will be some extra cost. It will be within the numbers flagged to Chris. It'll be certainly for the next year. What we are waiting on at the moment is the asset management plan to come through, because what is imposed by various things such as support systems on the roof for harnesses, etc. Those have to be certified every year. Lifts have to be certified every year. The scissor lift has to be certified. There's certification costs that will be added to our base costs. Other than that, there are, one of the important lessons out of the past of the gallery is that we have to have a very firm and clear maintenance plan for the future, and that again is being prepared. We're due to get that in the second week of May, so then we will be in a position to finalise where we're going under SOIs, and Chris is aware of that. So.
Okay, thanks very much. On behalf of the committee and the council, I want to congratulate everyone on the successful opening and successful completion within budget and on time of the project, which is very, very good. And we'll now no doubt have some questions. I'll lead off by asking a question. In the Mayor's letter of expectation, she indicated that the council would like to see some detail on a marketing plan to increase the income from the visitors attending. How is that marketing plan, as a plan, going? Have you actually produced a marketing plan?
Yes, we have. We are still refining some of the detail of that, but this slide gives you some idea of where we're heading. We're certainly concentrating on growing our social media presence, and that's like as followers and so forth are increasing with that, and we're keeping on working with that. And clearly, as I said before, word of mouth, or positive word of mouth, which is also spread, of course, by social media, is very important to us, that visitors have a really good experience and they share that really good experience out there.
I think also marketing, yes, we can do smart ways where doesn't cost a lot, but, and dare I say, comparisons are odious, but when you go to New Plymouth, as soon as you get to the airport, you walk through the foyer there and you look straight at a big sign saying Govett Brewster Art Gallery. Now, big signs cost money. I think the council and us could get smart, and it would be great to work with you on that, in highlighting around the district that there is an art gallery and where it is. Like, we're not in the CBD like the museum, and there are other organisations, I say the School of Music founders, and of course the museum itself, where in smart places they have signs saying you're 3 kilometres from the Suter or from the School of Music or something, you're 2 kilometres from, or it's 100 yards down the road too. So I think there are ways in which we could work with the City Council, because you do your own signage obviously, to highlight some of these destinations, and in particular the Suter. But the hard cost of putting up a good sign at the airport, it's $8,000, it's $10,000, whatever it is. We don't have much money in the marketing plan. We're trying to get as smart as we can with those sort of low cost, no cost public ways of saying things. But if you want to put in full page ad in Art New Zealand to gain street cred at the political level in terms of art, that's $1,000, isn't it? We only have a half page if we're lucky. So some of that, you put it in, you get it back, and if you don't put it in, you're not as well known.
Through the chair, please, Councillor Rogers. What was the question?
I was just inquiring as to the annual marketing budget.
John is going to refer to the books.
I'll just sort that out and we'll come back on that question.
Councillor Matheson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just in relation to signage, Craig, my committee, Works and Services, are possibly going to undertake a survey on all our signage within the CBD area, hopefully this year.
Oh, wonderful.
So we'll keep you in mind.
Thanks, Paul.
Okay.
Appreciate that.
Whilst they're looking up that detail, I'll ask the Chief Executive, can you explain and outline the thinking behind the recommendation that the grant be 15,000 and not the 20,000 requested?
This is for the free admission.
Yes, Mr. Chair, I believe it is covered in the report, but Mr. Ward has made the point, and I'm just looking to find the exact wording, but Mr. Ward has made the point at 4.2 that the Trust has conservatively estimated income of $5,000 to $6,000 income through the donation box. If Council was of a mind to continue providing funding for free entry, it could consider reducing the grant from the $20,000 that had been previously provided for a full year by $5,000 to recognise the donations and reduce the impost on the ratepayers to $15,000.
Thank you. Right, so we're now open for questions to either the representative of the suitor or the Chief Executive. First up, Councillor Dahlberg.
Thank you, through Mr. Chair.
We'll get there.
Thank you for the presentation. Very well done. My question is twofold. One is the pages 73. You've got quite a nice, I'm going to call it a business plan, I think, on why we should have a free entry or free admission. So my question is that becoming part of your business plan going forward?
Definitely part of the business plan is to remain free, because I think, as Julie suggested, it's an expectation, a public expectation around New Zealand that when you go to an art gallery, there's no admission cost. It's following a British model, interestingly enough, where if you've been to Britain, you get in free. It's the only gallery, national gallery system that is free, I think, in the sense that you pay if you go to France or you go to America in galleries, as you do to get to national parks. So it's more of a cultural rather than a sort of absolute statement that you should be free or not free. But it's our intention that we remain free.
Okay, so my question probably is then, from that there, are you going to build that $20,000 or whatever, because it looks like we don't actually know what's missing from administration. We know you get gifts or donations to 6,000 or whatever. As that number increases, maybe that gets bigger, but it's not going to be a large amount of money by the looking of things. So that leads me to your other revenue, lease of the CAF, etc., which you comment in there would be difficult if you didn't have free admission, which is why my comment about, are you building this into your business plan? Because as a councillor, you know, we're providing funding for lots of different organisations, and I'd like to see, if it was me personally, that 15,000 rather than one-off cost going forward, or 20,000, whatever the decision is, comes in under your business plan. I think it's 480, and then I think it just looks more professional. That's not stopping people requesting money from the council for one-off, like you want to bring a certain art one, like we've just got down the museum at the moment. You know, I'm kind of thinking, but I'd like to think this is built into your plan, which you've got. My other question is your lease on the CAF. Is that sort of hitting your expectations or not?
The lease on the CAF is set to market rates. So it takes into account location, it takes into account where it sits in the market. And the answer is it went up considerably. I couldn't give you the numbers off the top of my head, but it certainly went up by circa around 40% when we moved into the new premises. So partly that reflects the fact it is a new premise, therefore that's how it's valued, but equally it's valued against other cafes in the area and benchmarked against those.
one further question through you, Mr. Chair, was on your, you mentioned there about signs, etc. I know myself, when I'm walking around, I see the younger generation, or even our generation myself, we have our iPhones and we're looking at Google Maps. I know we'd like to have big signs, but it tends to be this thing. Are you fully utilising that service, Google Maps, where to find the suitor, even an app that sort of says the suitor's here, this is what it looks like, come and view us? Are you doing something like that?
We do have that service on our website, but apropos to that, if you go to the street view for Bridge Street, Google Maps is out of date, and I raised the issue with one of your council communications people to see if that applied to other places in Nelson, which it does at the moment. So I don't know if the council can put pressure on to get some updates to street views and things in Google or Google Maps.
And I think a lot of this work, even though we do have a very good volunteer group that some of whom are very savvy with the new IT and technology, it still falls to our staff, and we've been reminded that there's only two full-time staff and a few part-time staffs. Other organisations do designate 2 staff members up to a quarter or a half of their time, and I'm thinking of one quite close to where we are that does that for that sort of work. We simply don't have the resource at present to be able to do that yet. The sky's the limit, and it is the way that we are going, Bill, I think, with that social media way of advertising, though people still do read hard copy. They still do come to the airport and see something right in front of them. People still read. But that social media, we would like to have a little bit more staff power to do a bit more work in that area.
So, one last question, sorry, you brought another point out there, a very good one. The heritage building component of the suitor, are you in that link as well? Do you market yourself and there's a heritage building as well as an art building?
We absolutely do verbally, in the sense that that art space that you see there is the oldest art space in New Zealand. The floor of that gallery, Otago and Auckland, I think, were ahead of us with an art gallery by a year or two, but they shifted venues, so we've ended up with the primo sort of cultural art space in terms of, you know, heritage in New Zealand. And we have played that up, and even our group, the Legacy Group, refers to that fact that you are not only building forward for Nelson, but you're also echoing back into the legacy that is this wonderful place called Nelson. So we play it up a lot, yes.
Can I just add to that? I have promoted with the Heritage Group, or Nelson Heritage, that the suitor, the School of Music, when it comes back on stream, and the Theatre Royal, that's a unique proposition for Nelson, that they've got these 3 cultural facilities that are still fulfilling their original purpose in their original buildings. That is a unique proposition in New Zealand, that this is the only place with that combination.
So my follow-up question would be, so I'm sure you're going to have that in the detail in your marketing plan, and we'll enjoy looking forward to receiving that.
Thank you. Councillor Courtney.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Craig, Julie and John. First of all, thank you so much for the work you're doing in this area. It's fantastic, and I think the people of the region really appreciate it, your commitment. And as for the report, I read through the whole thing, and you need to be congratulated on that too. It's very, very comprehensive. At the beginning, I had so many questions to ask. Got to the end, and they were all answered practically. So, you know, that is a sign of a good report. What staffing numbers did you have originally when you in the old gallery? What were the staffing numbers there compared to now?
Much the same. They're slightly different roles though. We used to have 3 full-time people, including an exhibition officer. At the moment, 3 full-time. Myself, the curator, and we have a higher emphasis now on visitor services or customer service staff, because of partly the configuration of the building, but also the fact that we are open 7 days a week all year.
Another question. I've got just one or two little ones, tiny little ones.
I thought that
Quite
had been answered for you in the report.
Well, yes. Yes, I did. Oh. What's your volunteer numbers? You've mentioned you're building up a volunteer base. What are they at the moment?
We have, I can't put an exact figure on it, but within the program we've got sort of two strands of volunteers, ones that work behind the scenes, if you like, in the archives and so on, which there's about 5 dedicated to that, but the others are in the visitor experience side, and there'd probably be at any one time between 20 and 30 enrolled in the program or actively on the roster.
Yes. Now, a number of people have mentioned to me, and I see you say you have a kinetic donation box. Some, and they are actively involved with you, believe there's a need for a second one. They say that so many people are asking, you know, is it free, the entry, when they come in, approaching staff or volunteers? And they say one position to the left of your workstation, or whatever you might call it, your visitor reception desk, would be ideal. A second donation box with good signage, not large but discreet, entry free, and donations appreciated. And that's come from several people. I can think of Vera, one, Lola, a number of people. And I think that's worth considering. Yep. And do you? I'll finish off. I have got a number, but success of your exhibitions. How do you determine that? Do you have some way of monitoring and determining the success of each exhibition?
I think success of exhibition is an area that there's a lot of public debate around in art, in the sense that if you just go on a straight numbers through and you get something that is like Len Lai, the wonderful kinetic sculpture, you get a good variety of gender there, and they're partly looking at the engineering as much as they're looking at the art. So you have some of your old favourites there. The public will love them because they're used to them. You'll get good numbers, as we did, and quite consciously in our opening, putting our treasures out there. Hirimatanga, those beautiful gullies, you know, those paintings. And then you have the ones that everyone debates, the thorny issues, when you have the modern art that people say a monkey could paint or is very difficult to understand. And the numbers tend to be lower for those sorts of works. You have to acknowledge that culturally you are trying to run a professional art gallery, and at the cutting edge of modern art is something that we are, I think, more than obliged, we should take to the community, not in any sense of, you know, feeling as though we're doing this to an audience that doesn't like it, but to bring what wonderful modern art is being created in New Zealand, and we are very good artists in New Zealand compared to the rest of the world. We stand with the rest of the world in that, but we won't get the big numbers through when we do that necessarily. So it's kind of an obligation, I think, to do it, but in 20 years they'll look back and say you did the right thing.
Thank you.
So I don't think you can judge it on numbers alone through the door as to how you get success in an exhibition. You really have to look at it in terms of what lasting effect does it have on the cultural input of Nelson.
Thank you. I've got a number of councillors wishing to make questions, but I'm going to jump in with one now, and it relates to section 4.6 on the agenda, which is on page 26, in which the author of the report mentions that council doesn't contribute to the acquisition of items, but makes the point that each item has to be insured and housed and stored. And it suggests that further clarification be sought from you guys today in relation to how that collection can be developed within physical storage and financial insurance constraints. And my question is, if a friend of the suitor wished their money not necessarily go to art acquisition, because I think I read in the report that at the moment contributions from friends only go to acquisitions. Couldn't they? No. If it,
sorry, a correction on that.
Can they go to operational or to the building or to the?
That they have to go to framing or to preservation, or yes, but I think bequests and people that give can quite clearly enunciate where they want their gift to go. and some do, and many don't, of course. They're quite happy for us to make that decision. So there's a variety of ways that comes in, Mr. Chairperson. So no, they don't all go to acquisitions, but we are in a situation, and it gives me a chance to say it, that most councils have some input into acquisition of artworks at their local gallery. And sometimes that's capped at a certain level as a dollar for dollar, so that if the legacy group, if the group of the council of the art gallery in Auckland or Wellington or New Plymouth raises $100,000, the council will match that dollar for dollar up to a certain figure, in case someone gives a huge amount of money. We don't put that imposition on you at all, on the ratepayer. We say no, we'll raise all the money ourselves for acquisition. We're unusual in doing that, I might add. It's not our intention to change that at present.
Yeah, and I note that not many ever sell any items to meet any of the costs.
It's a brave thing to deaccession a work of art. We did during the horror years of the 1970s in New Zealand. I think it was 1970, wasn't it, when we gave away the Weber to Papa for $300,000. That's a wonderful painting of Captain Cook's visit in the Marlborough Sounds. The suitor, of course, self-governing body with no money, had to sell it. It was one of our great mistakes. Works of art, if they're good, if you've chosen correctly in the first place, they appreciate, they're central to your culture, you're throwing away the family jewels.
Yep. Councillor Walker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through you, you've talked around finance and whatnot, but in your statement of intent, item 2.2, key priorities, you list a number of very commendable things, but I, as a guardian of the ratepayer's purse, would I actually like to see a key priority recognising that maybe an aspiration to become more financially self-funding? You know, it's not listed as one of your key priorities, and I think that it would be nice to see that.
I think it would be difficult when you use a phrase, a broad phrase like more financially self-funding. I think we will increasingly, if we're successful, gain more funds outside of the ratepayers' money, but more if you're thinking of in terms of percentage of what we get from the ratepayer versus what we get from, if you wish, friends or legacy. That's a hard stretch for us to do, as I think it is for anybody, be it of this our sort of cultural nature, School of Music, Theatre Royal, etc., etc. You know, that these council-controlled operations are often there because they are subsidised through public ratepayer money, simply because they wouldn't exist without that, but they're crucial and critical to the way in which we define ourselves, like sports fields. I mean, they'll never be self-funding a sports field.
No, it's just that, you know, we have tremendous pressure on the council to provide resources for across the whole community, and I just feel that it would be nice to see a bit more emphasis on your self-funding or within your own resources activity. I just feel a bit more comfortable to see it as more of a stated priority.
I think we should. Thank you, Councillor Walker. We should definitely look back into the way in which we've worded that. We are going out there now, we are raising hundreds of thousands of dollars separate from the ratepayer, so I feel proud of the fact that we're doing that, and we have a very active group whose role is simply to raise that money. So perhaps we're not reflecting already what we're doing well enough in our wording.
Yeah, I know. Item number 4, to develop partnerships, possibly touches on that. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Walker. Councillor Rutledge.
Thank you. I'll just give you the opportunity to answer the question from before, if I could, to start off with.
It's not actually split out in the figures I've got here. It's under marketing services. So I did have a figure in my head, but I didn't want to say it if I had it in writing to check it. It's approximately 15,000, not including the salaries and wages component, with the time spent, which is just covered under the salaries and wages figures and not split out. But about 15 grand. Most of that's in advertising and that type of promotional work rather than strictly the word marketing, if you're interpreting that as much wider. Okay?
I wonder, just as a follow-up to that, can you undertake to refine that information into something that looks a little bit more like a marketing plan with the budget?
Yeah, that will be a marketing plan as a part of the plan and split out from the accounts. But I'm saying just at the moment within the accounts, what we've presented to council, that's where that number sits. But certainly from an overall marketing point of view, I would anticipate that would include having a look at how much time is spent as well and costing that in as well. Okay.
Right, thank you.
I have a reasonably long series of questions.
Right, kick off and get them going.
Okay, very good. What are your numbers over the last 3 months? So in the report there's listed for the first quarter you're open. What's been the last 3 months?
It depends on which month, but
January, February, March.
I can't remember January off the top of my head, but March was well over 9,000. Going back.
Sorry, I did.
Went the wrong way, I think.
So how are you tracking towards your 110,000 minimum target for the year?
We're doing okay. The only one of the months, January, which I can't quite read from here, but in there we were just short by about 100 or so from what I extrapolated as a target per month.
Do you have any further commentary on why you think January and potential was quite low? I know a lot of other businesses and attractions around town had biggest Januaries on record, so I would have hoped to have seen that a lot higher. Any thoughts?
Both the museum and ourselves had slightly lower December, January, and I don't know what's the cause of that, whether that was a flow on from the earthquakes and the difficulty getting here from Christchurch, because we usually have a lot of Christchurch visitors over the summer. I don't know.
And I think also, wearing another hat, January was down in the CBD quite significantly. So despite what you've said about being big numbers, there wasn't spending. And there's some anxiety around why is that happening. You know, it is known that, of course, certain types of visitors don't spend money and certain types of other visitors do spend money. We had the people, but in the CBD, the spending was down.
Okay, thank you. Look, I actually really disagree with the idea that the suitor is not worth paying a couple of bucks to go into. And I think I really would encourage some further consideration of an entry fee charge. I've been to a number of art galleries where I've paid considerable money to get through the door, and those places had queues and queues of people lining up. So I think if the offering is right, if people won't pay $2 to get in, or $3, which would put $250,000 a year into your pockets, then I really question whether the offering is exactly right. So I would really encourage some further thinking around, and maybe it's some testing. Is the offering worth paying $2 or $3 to get into? Your thoughts on that?
If I can respond to that, most galleries that have, New Zealand galleries that have imposed an entrance charge find their visitor numbers plummet as a consequence, whatever the level that is. And if we can draw lessons from the MTG in Napier, which opened with a very high admission charge, their visitor numbers have not met a satisfactory level after their redevelopment, and hardly any locals go there. And $2 or $3 might not seem much, and we used to charge $3, but children free. But if you think about a school holiday period, that's actually quite a significant imposition on a family if they come in and they all have to pay. And it also dissuades people from going, say, transferring from our cafe into the galleries, say at lunchtime. There's none of that. I'll just pop in and have a look at the exhibition. You don't get that transfer of person, which we really want to encourage. We want people to have a taste of something and think, oh, I need to come back in the weekend. And if they come back in the weekend, then they might spend some more money in our shop or be inclined to make a donation. And we really want to encourage people to spend in our shop, spend maybe going to the theatre, in the cafe, and feeling that they want to make a donation rather than it being imposed on them.
I think if I could come in a little bit there too, we do occasionally charge, and art galleries do occasionally charge, and if you go to Auckland Art Gallery now, it's $25 to get into a show that's come from, effectively from England via Sydney. So special off shows, the Len Lai we did charge, I believe. That was a wonderful show. So you can pick situations where you do put a cost on what the product is, which is what you're driving at. And you're right, in many countries overseas, not in New Zealand, with the exception of England, who did run charges for 10 years and then dropped them, I might add, probably like the Napier option. But I think we've got to look at the art in the community as an essential part of our culture and of our being. And if that's the case, I think we should be giving it to the ratepayer in the same way that we give them sports fields for free, the way we give them, the Queen's Garden for free, etc. It's a part of our being. It's a part of the way in which we interpret ourselves and which we say, this is where we're at in our relationship to ourselves and to the land. This is the art saying how we see ourselves. And in that sense, I think it's appropriate and very appropriate that a local authority acknowledges that that's an essential, not a peripheral part of the way in which we describe and define ourselves as a culture. And therefore, like those other places, be it the roads or whatever else, we don't charge for the use of it.
Okay, thank you. Can we talk a little bit about some of the numbers in the budget? I notice in your donations and sponsorships, your current forecast is sitting at $4,384, with a plan of $25,000, and then in 2019, 2020, you're up to $42,000 in donations and sponsorships. What is the plan to get from what's currently a very low number, to times that by what, a factor of 10 or more in 2 years?
Currently, this year we've held back the degustation dinner, which is actually a major fundraising component, because of a clash of dates, and also because it will now have a change of form. So we're working on a new promotion to bring money in from there. We're also, through exhibitions, do and will be increasing the targeting of sponsorship around specific exhibitions, which again will bring in sponsorship money, donations money. The donations themselves, we certainly try and actively encourage that. We're certainly working very hard in the philanthropy area to bring in further contributions. One of the areas that may yet be subject to further work is, for example, education, where we now have a gap between what Leotic provide each year versus the cost. So that's an area that we'll target for sponsorship as well. So those types of things we are taking as areas we identify and have that as a comprehensive strategy to build those areas of income. The areas we will continue to work hard on, obviously, are things like shop, venue hire, etc., to continue to grow those income streams, and we are doing so.
Thank you. One more question, if I could, through the chair. Your personnel costs, now you made mention before that your FTEs are practically the same as that they were, but I noticed that personnel costs have increased by $110,000 with further increases planned. Can you explain why that is such a large increase?
There are a lot of one-off costs of re-entry to the building. that I've actually been back through doing an exercise on since the 6 monthly accounts. And in fact, those will be more correctly covered under the cost of the project, and therefore we'll bring those back as part of project costs. They should have been there in the first place, but I guess that's part of the pressure that's been on with a major $12 million build on our clerical staff.
Okay, so does that mean, if I got that right, going forward your staffing costs will be considerably lower, which might well get your budget to a balanced point?
Not necessarily. I'd have to check your increased number, but essentially, let me just go back to personnel costs. Yeah, 356 up to 429. That's the extra cost of front of house is adding probably 50 odd thousand in terms of cost of extra time cover. To have 2 people at the front, we used to have 1 at the front, but that's 7 days a week. So you'll appreciate that configures through. The remainder of that cost, as I said, there's a certain amount there, but we've also got a placeholder. We get our first year's maintenance effectively under warranties and under coverage under the contract. We do have warranties over and above that, which we will be administering, but there are going to be maintenance, and we've got a placeholder in our numbers against that bringing back in that resource. We probably only need about 50% of what we had before in terms of cost numbers. So bear in mind it's in more, and those numbers are being worked on, and that is why we said, hey, we need a little bit more time just to tie down the costs going forward, which we are working on.
Because I see that 7 FTEs divided by that number, you're at $66,000 per FTE, which seems rather high for a front of house staff. It's not a real figure.
No, it's not, certainly not the actual average that's there. As I said, there are some one-off costs in there that have got to be taken out.
And I think also we are grappling, as I note other people in our situation are grappling with being good employers, and the notion around what's a living wage or not a living wage. I know has been discussed in a council context. What should we be paying our workers? I can state quite categorically here today that we are underpaying our staff at the SUTA in relation to those sorts of principles, and that is not making us a good employer. We feel embarrassed about that as a board, but we're constrained by a very tight budget. It's a third of the cost of the museum, for instance, or less. It's a real struggle for us to get $1 to pay a worker, and so we're reflecting that to be a good employer, to treat people fairly for the wonderful job they work. And our curator came to Nelson recently from another art gallery in the North Island, accepted that she would get less money, is working wonderfully, doing extremely good exhibitions. To keep her, it would be nice to be able to pay her on a parity with other similar organisations like us. At present, we're not.
Okay, thank you. And finally, if you want art painted by monkeys, we can talk.
Capo. Thank you.
I just, before I go to Councillor Skinner, the last time I attended the Dunedin Public Art Gallery, and granted it was a couple of years or more ago, I had to dig through the Otago gorse in my pocket to get the admission fee, because out-of-town visitors had to pay but locals didn't. And I note in your papers that you've looked at that as a possibility, and you don't do it. I think Councillor Courtney's suggestion of a more visible donation box, I didn't see it when I came in last week. I didn't see it. Might be a good idea. Councillor Skinner.
My questions on personnel have been answered. Thank you. Thank you, guys.
Right, I think that completes our questions. Councillor Noonan.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was holding out to see who was asking what, so I was waiting for the financial questions, and I feel like, well, I've got some more. So through you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for your comprehensive report. I had to read it several times to absorb it, but that's probably because I'm coming down with the cold that I've got, so unfortunately my brain's going to be a little soggy today. So I guess I'm going to page 36, which is the unaudited financial statements, and I'm looking at the 6-month budget compared to the actual, and there's a variation of quite a lot there, and I'm sure there's a reason, and I'm just wondering what. So that's really, my questions are going to be really of clarification for me to understand what the accounts are. So the first one is that the exhibition actual against the budget, and I'm just wondering what the reason for that is.
So you're saying the exhibitions there were well below budget? Simply at this stage we haven't had major costs of bringing in external exhibitions because we've been able to operate largely with our own collection, but there's clearly provision against that, so there could still be upcoming costs there.
So that's for exhibitions that come.
And that's where we may
that come
make a
through.
saving in a year.
External exhibitions, thank
Yep.
you. Okay, thank you. And the next question is, Councillor Rutledge has asked a few of these, so that's going to save us some time. I don't need that one. This is hard copy, Joy, isn't it? I'm going through to your statement of intent now, and I'm on page, our page 58, which is 7 in your papers, and I'm looking at 7.2.5, which is the capital expenditure, and there's a little bit of notation there, and I'm wondering whether that's actually outdated. It's talking about the majority of the capital expenditure during the period will relate to redevelopment, but this is for prospective, this is for the future, so I'm just wondering whether there is any capital expenditure in, for the next couple of years and what that will be.
There's capital expenditure. I've just been in a meeting this morning identifying provisions that we've got against other CapEx items still to be done. Just off the top of my head, it was about 180,000 yet to be spent. Most of that will be this year. But there are areas like exhibition furniture, which we need to cater for the largest thing, that may take a little bit longer to tie down. Certainly, we're very close between the project manager and Ian and I. We're very, very close to having our numbers tied up. I've got a bit of reconciliation work to do next week, but otherwise things are looking pretty tight, and we're still within, we're happily within in the budget, but it's just a little bit early to tack down. We've still got a few items that are under review. I don't want to name what those are, but in any building you'll get items that aren't performing according to fitness for purpose. So we're working through those back to the architects and through the engineers, and that process will be ongoing at least for the first 12 months. Up to October of 2017. So there could well be some items where I guess the rule of thumb is if they are still below the overall committed building value, but they're items that would have cost us to do that, we only ever get back what extra we have to pay as opposed to what the improvement may be. So we'll just work through that process.
Okay,
I don't want to go
through the chair. So that narration still is valid for the moment because you're still
absolutely
wrapping up some of the redevelopment.
And tying it all
that's what I wanted. Thank you.
Okay.
The other one was at the end when the dividend policy, which of course is not a monetary policy, but it says that annually review the non-financial dividend, which will be returned to the wider regional community. And I don't know what that is. I'm just wondering whether we can get some, what that looks like.
These are kind
come
of
back
notes
to-
that
you
come
can-
out of the
I mean,
annual audit.
It's not
paper.
essential, just for my
No,
understanding.
but I mean, in a sense, it's an asset, but it's an asset we're never going to sell.
Yep.
So it's an art collection and it's a building that is accruing great value, and in fact, art accrues, if you're smart, and we are smart, far ahead of inflation or any other value indicator that in a community. So we're accruing at a vast level, but it's not for sale, so it's a strange sort of thing to put into
So
it.
through the chairs, some of that is
economic
the
statement.
art collection itself and the ability for the public to view it. Is that where we're going? Is that,
I would imagine.
that-
Yeah, I would imagine that
Okay.
that is what it's trying to account for, but it's not an asset in a normal sense.
No, I understand that, thank you. And now I'm moving on to page 60, which is the financial budgets forecasting. And I couldn't find, there was a bit of commentary about the insurance being a challenge, but I can't see that in the financials. It obviously comes in under another heading, so I was just wondering what that was.
It's under the administration costs.
Okay, that's why that looks high. Okay.
That also, the recoveries of outgoings under accounting rules have to be shown through the revenue side.
That's fine, I just wanted to know where it was.
So there are recoveries against that help net the result.
Thank you. And I think the last thing I was going to ask is is the suitor aware that we've got a budget of 62,000 for operational in our AP draft, our AP? Were you aware of that? 62,000 in the annual plan, the proposed annual plan?
You're saying yes, we are aware of that, and we will be submitting at the appropriate time for that.
Okay.
But that would be the upper limit for this year.
Thank you. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Noonan. Just going back to the point that Councillor Noonan made on item 7.2.5, the capital expenditure, it went through my mind. It's a very rare thing and a very lucky thing if when you completed a development, you've got everything perfect. That you don't find things you could have done slightly better or just tweaked a little bit this way or that way. And it went through my mind in reading all the papers that the interplay between the CAF and the suitor and where the door is, and this being the reason why there would be extra costs required to have free admission, could the door have been placed in a better place?
That's a hard one, but to get disabled access to the cafe requires a ramp, and we don't have the opportunity to put the ramp outside, otherwise it'd be out in the pond. To get the 1 in 12, it has to be inside, and that was the best solution, so that's where the door is.
I think it's fair to say in designing the building we had to build within a very, very tight footprint, and quite correctly the putting of a ramp out from the cafe would have been 27 metres long, and there's clearly not room down the cafe steps to put 27 metres of ramp, and that's because of the change of heights of the land. So that really dictated obviously the ramp into the cafe had to be at a particular degrees, and it's actually at those degrees and no more, no less. So unfortunately that dictated it.
It has the downside of potential more
There's
costs.
there's always compromises in the building, and that's our compromise situation, unfortunately.
Councillor Rutledge, you indicated you have another question.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Questions relating to health and safety. Have you had any LTIs over the last, since you opened? Lost time injuries?
No.
Excellent. And do you maintain a hazards or near-miss register that one of us could go and look at if we wanted to?
Yes, there is a register of hazards, and probably due for updating actually, but yes, there's a hazards, and it's part of my responsibilities under audit and risk that I will be doing some work on that.
Good to hear, thank you.
I think we have reached the stage where we're looking for a motion. Councillor Dahlberg has indicated that he wishes to move.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to move the motion just with an additional note at the bottom.
Again, you want to do the whole thing? I was looking at doing the first parts first up here.
Yes.
Receiving the report.
Can do that.
So Councillor Dahlberg is moving the receipt of the report with the note that the Bishop Suitor Trust draft statement of intent may be required following confirmation of funding within the draft annual plan. You understand what that means, visitors? That we have to go through our annual plan process. Okay, it's been moved by Councillor Dahlberg, seconded by Councillor Matheson. Is there any discussion? There's not. I'll put that. All in favour, please say aye. Against, no, carried. Councillor Dahlberg.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Moving the second component with a note on the bottom that in future the free entry component would be included in the full business plan.
So everyone clear that Councillor Dahlberg is moving the motion as printed in the agenda, but with the addition under the second clause, the approval, it will read, approves the grant of 15,000 to the Bishop Suter Trust to continue to allow for free entry to all visitors in 2017-18, and that in future the free entry component will be included in the full business plan. It relates to his question that he made earlier in relation to the business plan. Do we have a seconder? It's been seconded by Councillor Matheson. This is a recommendation to Council. It's open for discussion. Councillor Courtney.
I think at this early stage it's a little premature to be reducing this figure from 15 to 20,000. I think it would...
From 20 to 15?
20 to 15, yeah. Yes, I do. So I'd like us to think seriously about that before we put this through to Council. It's just such early days, costs are still settling down, people are just starting to really appreciate what we have there in the way of an asset. It could end up being, in fact it's probably on the way to being our #1 attraction in Nelson. When you compare it to the figures, the throughput through the founders at about 38, 40,000, you look at other attractions that we have, for example Natureland, it's up there, it's way up there, 3 times the throughput of people. So I do caution us to, at this early stage, they've hardly got their breath, their second wind, so to move it from 20 to 15 I think is a disincentive, and I would like us to think a little bit more about that before we put this through.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Councillor Noonan.
I'd like to propose an amendment that we delete the third paragraph, the approval of the grant, and discuss it at the AP. I'd need a seconder for that.
So you're wishing to make an amendment that the clause which starts with the underlined word approves is not included?
I'm just a bit concerned it might be a direct negative, but maybe we can get some...
It might, I didn't hear you.
I'm just, sorry, I just want some advice on that, on the ramifications of taking that third clause out, so that we can discuss that with the AP, because there is a proposal to increase operational costs in our AP of 62,000. I don't think this item should be discussed concurrently with that. I think it's odd to be discussing one part without the other.
So I have an amendment which has been seconded. Did we have a seconder to the motion? Yes, we did, Councillor Matheson. Yeah. So now we are discussing the amendment. Incidentally, the normal practice, the normal best practice that we have now, when we reach this debate stage, we farewell you from the table, because we're now in debate. The question time is completed. So thank you very much. Anyone wish to speak to the amendment?
I would, Mr. Chair, I think goes part way to satisfying me. It would give us time.
I think it is exactly what you're trying to do.
Yes, I'm asking for time for further thought. I don't want us to rush it. So no, I'd be happy.
Would you be happy to withdraw your original motion in the seconder? That's been done. This now becomes the motion. It was moved by Councillor Noonan and seconded by Councillor Skinner. Is there any further discussion? Look at your the printed agenda. The motion, recommendation to Council will now end at the word constraints.
Yep.
Clear?
Yep.
Okay, I'll put that. There's no further discussion. All in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? No. It is carried. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Bishop Suter people. And yeah, we look forward to seeing you at the annual plan submissions, because you'll have another opportunity to convince us. Yes, we will now have a adjourn for morning tea break, have an informal chat to our other visitors in the gallery.
So the question is, if we'd have moved that, it would have been our recommendation to the annual plan.
That was our recommendation to full council.
Yeah, so that,
Just before we go on to item number 9, I see that I jumped over the chairperson's report. I didn't have any prepared report for you, but just a couple of things that I wish to mention. Thank you to the councillors that are taking part in the collection for Anzac Day, which is tomorrow. And that's appreciated very much by those that are doing that. And don't forget that the council has an Anzac Day service at 9 a.m. on the cathedral steps. That's in conjunction with all the other Anzac Day things on, but this is the council's actual service, which has been a service at the Cathedral Hill since 1982, I think. And the other thing I was going to mention was just a mention of what happened when I came into town with my wife on Easter Sunday. The town was full of people, the restaurants were chocker and really going well, and I was really disappointed that the people that looked to me to be wanting to be able to shop were not able to shop in Nelson as a result of the council's resolution not to do Easter Sunday shopping, and I think we definitely do need to look at it again next year. Marlborough did very, very well on the day, I'm told.
I had a good holiday that day, Mr. Chair.
So I'm just making that point there. Item number 9, and we welcome to the table Mr. Mark Rawson, Mr. John Palmer, and we have the report on pages 78 to 117. This report is being presented today by the Chief Executive on behalf of Mr. Ward. Madam Chief Executive, your report. Are there any alterations, additions or changes to the report?
No, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, I'm happy to take the report as read. I think that Mr. Wood has set out clearly before you the matters that he saw in both the letter of expectation that he sent, the statement of expectation, and the NRDA's response, and he is noting that the final statement comes connected to decisions made around the annual planning time.
Thank you. Councillors, have you any questions of the Chief Executive on the Chief Executive's report? Councillor Matheson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good report, thank you. Just with regard for the additional funding, I should ask you, Mr. Palmer, have you had any indication that our neighbours are keen to participate?
I'm sorry, I know Councillor Matheson has suggested that the chairman might answer that, but because TDC's funding comes through Nelson City Council as part of a contractual arrangement between Nelson and Tasman, I think that matter sits more correctly at Nelson City's door than at NRDA's door.
Okay.
I'm sure Mr. Palmer has an idea of that, but I can tell you that we have had discussions.
Yes.
Tasman District Council are not producing an annual plan, not consulting on an annual plan. So they will not be considering it in the same process as we are. They are looking at the matter in the context of their how do I put that, their 9-month financial outturn, and would indeed consider that their best approach would be to wait and see what their financials look like as at 30 June. And I can see Mr. Palmer nodding out in the outskirts of my eye, and responding to us in the manner in which they see most appropriate at that time. At this stage, they would consider that matter to be appropriately to be positive.
I don't know what all that means, but anyway, can I then ask you a question, Madam? Are we making provision in our AP for the additional funding? Thank you.
Is there a question for the Chief Executive? I just want to deal with Chief Executive questions first. Okay. Thank you, Chief Executive. You may remain at the table if you wish, but we're now asking for questions direct to the representatives of NRDA. So we have firstly Councillor Rutledge, followed by Councillor Noonan.
Thank you, Mr.
And
Chair.
any others? No.
Can you be very explicit for me as to what we get for our additional investment? This additional $200,000. There's some good mentions of it in the report, and I see your reaction.
No, the question is directed now to John or Mark.
Yeah, to you guys. Can you very succinctly summarise what that is? And then my follow-up question, which you can take, is if you only got half the money, if one council didn't come to the table there, would that scrap all of the plan, or would you be able to deliver some parts of it?
Cool. Through you, Mr. Chair. Just referring back to the presentation that we made after the last meeting, which I realised was a wee while ago, and these things sort of end up 6-month report and their statement of intent all at one, but in effect there's 4 things that the money will do. It means that basically a higher impact execution of the consumer talent and visitor attraction marketing program. So that's one element, which means basically we can do more at higher impact in a shorter period of time, which is basically the first and most important, not most important actually, one of the 2 most important elements that came out of the Regional Identity Project. Okay, so that was the first element there. The second one was the more timely delivery of the first 2 regional identity investment cases. And you may recall at that presentation, and I think it was with everybody, we sort of walked through what the those investment cases are and what they look like. And then the third element was it will give us an opportunity to increase or leverage the funding from the private sector and some of our other strategic partners. So effectively it will give us a greater opportunity to work with the likes of the airlines and government, actually, in respect of the airlines and other partners for the consumer part, and then for the investment cases is working with government, in particular MBIE. And then the last element was maintaining the ability to deliver on all of the other components of the SOI that weren't specifically targeted on the Regional Identity Consumer Program and the Regional Identity Investment Cases, which are the 2 primary elements. I think the second part of your question is if we only got none and or half and or something in the middle, we would still go back to our philosophy of doing really well what we can afford, as opposed to trying to do everything with the funding that we have available. And it would depend on what that looks like as to how we'll actually go about delivering on the statement of intent. So some of those elements will be included, I suspect, and some won't. It's just that we'd have to relook at the whole statement of intent from a priority perspective to the way we would deliver those functions.
Perhaps if I can just add a couple of things that aren't necessarily different, but if we go back 12 months to both the transition piece and then the new structure, one of the things that we said quite clearly was to focus on doing things really well. And in the development of the regional identity, ideally, we would have spent more time and particularly more cash in the research phase to get to where we've got to. I think we've done a good job with the funds we had available, but I think it has been a bit less than ideal given how important it is. The impact from here then is both in the development and in the initiation. without the additional money, the impact of what we've done so far will be lower and slower, and I don't think that's in anybody's interest.
And lastly, if I may, you're obviously talking about the regional identity because you know what it is and what it looks like. Would you agree that it's very challenging for those of us sitting around the table who haven't yet seen it to be making these decisions when we haven't yet seen what the plan is?
Just through Mr. Chair, we are still in the development phase. We're getting closer to the end. Do we know exactly what it is? Absolutely not. But we have certainly started to get a lot more focused and refine what the identity might look like. I think though the second, I just wanted to reiterate back to the point is the identity is all about the unique and compelling proposition of the Nelson Tasman region. And then again, coming back to the point that John made of effectively that will be as good as the way we deliver or execute really the consumer marketing end of it and the investment case component of it, and that will effectively be a whole lot longer and slower for the investment we've already made if we don't if we're unable to secure that additional funding. So I don't, in a simplistic way, I don't necessarily see that actually not knowing exactly what makes up the regional identity is a really critical component right now. You'll definitely be part of that process, but we definitely don't have some magical version of it floating around that's ready to be produced. Otherwise, I would love to be able to actually get some clarity myself, and for our team, for example, in that space, it creates some challenges. We're about to head to trends. We'll be using a lot of the existing product that we have in place, not new ones, for example. Yeah, we don't have it nailed just yet. This is the speed of the development process that probably really should take a couple of years that we've put into a relatively short period of time.
I was asked a pretty similar question at the TDC council meeting last week. My response was, firstly, if people are expecting, a great dawning of light of this and something that, in a few words, encompasses everything we've been working towards, they'll be disappointed because it's not going to be that. It is going to be a framework that sets a number of touch points of this unique character that can be used in a whole range of visitor and investment attractions. And the point I made last week was we'll know in about 5 years whether it's successful. I think it will be, I think Mark's timing of a couple of years to sort of get it embedded is about right. But this is not a quick fix. This is something carefully considered and constructed that by the time it becomes part of the DNA of each of those sectors and the key operatives in those sectors, we'll know that we've been successful.
Thank you very much. Looks like we're all looking forward to it, and my expectation is I'll be inspired by what you bring forward.
Councillor Courtney.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mark, what are you doing? It seems as though it's a new initiative here. I'm reading through on page 80. What was it? No, let's have a look here. 86. You talk about event strategy. Now, this seems a whole new direction for you. Can you elaborate on that a little bit for me, please?
Sure. At the moment, we effectively administer the events fund on behalf of Nelson City for those events that are, it's got a terminology, I think it's called the Economic Events Fund, so not the community parts, but what we are doing is working with your team on revising the event strategy for the destination, which aligns again to some of the regional identity elements and our visitor strategy focus. And then the second, the outcome of that would be a recommended refocusing of the strategy and perhaps the utilisation of that fund, and putting some more clarity into the way in which those funds are best utilised, instead of potentially at the moment there's a relatively broad set of parameters as to how the funds are best utilised, which potentially don't always, or could build a less than perfect or maximum impact from the way those funds are used, and build a bit of a culture of as of right, because I've always run this event, I should get something, versus actually being a lot more specific and clear about what we're actually really trying to achieve from the public investment into events. So for example, seasonality would be a good example of that. Events that support the region's identity would be another one, versus potentially just I get public funding because I have always run this event and it's always been sort of successful, whether it needs the public funding or not.
And also, if you could elaborate for me on your dealings with the NMIT. You're working with them. In what capacity are you working with them? What direction are you taking there?
What page number was that on, Councillor Gordon?
It's on page 84 there.
So
we've also begun, you know, and I just sort of want...
look, a couple of things in respect of NMIT. One is NMIT, in my view, are one of the most important strategic partners in any successful destination, and I'm working with Tony a lot, both on their strategic direction and how that aligns to the region's economic development strategy, and also how we present, and I mean the collective we, present that conversation with central government, who are major funders of all parties, in a more aligned and focused manner on what's really important. Second element, and what this part of the statement of intent refers to, is bringing that down to specific initiatives related to the business development and sort of and innovation sort of ecosystem, how all of those functions fit together within the Nelson Tasman region. And NMIT have been a key facilitator in that. So Innovate, which some of you may be aware of, is one example in that space, and through NMIT ourselves, the likes of the Chamber, looking to work with some other parties around pulling together an incubator program that's proven throughout New Zealand to support the startup environment in the Nelson Tasman region, and so that's what this is specifically related to, one initiative, but really we're looking at how the whole business development ecosystem works and what's the best and most appropriate use of public money, whether that's local or central government funded, to get the best outcomes for our business community. And what I would say in the last bit is this is focused at the startup end of that continuum, and then we have a whole lot of business as usual as businesses mature, but there's also some focus on the conversation at the more mature business end, particularly around businesses facing disruption from technology. So the way they used to operate not that many years ago is now potentially obsolete or seriously challenged, and for a region such as us, based on quite a strong primary production basis, there is a need for us to be well in tune and ahead of the game in respect of understanding what that disruption means for our whole economy, whether that's infrastructure provision, whether it's regulatory provision, whether it's just the business's ability to exist in a proactive sense. So obviously, hopefully ahead of the curve. So that's sort of the whole aspect of our engagement with NMIT, which I'd like to think is at a fairly high level, and we're fairly well engaged in their strategic direction as well.
Thank you. Thank you. Next to have Councillor Noonan, followed by Councillor Matheson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you. I'm just looking at the draft statement of intent and going back to the regional identity.
Which
and I'm
page
looking.
Are you on, Councillor Noonan?
Oh, big page 86, small page 4.
Thank you.
So I'm just looking at the timetable that's on there, and it's talking about the consumer testing and refinement in February, March, and deliverables in May. I'm thinking that probably needs to be extended a little bit because we've got a bit of work to do, haven't we?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair, we are aiming by the end of this month to have something that we're looking to bring to a, for want of a better term, a soft launch event early in June. Actually, I'm trying to nail the date of trying to get yourselves and Tasman District Council available one or pretty close to one day, which is a little bit of a challenge. But the work that we are doing is around getting as much as possible a finished product by the end of May,
Okay.
so that we can bring that as a overview to you probably in June at some point in time.
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Chair. I'm just checking on the consumer testing and refinement then that was going to be in February, March. Has that happened?
Yep. Yeah.
Okay.
It has.
And do you want to comment through the chair as to how that was going, how it went?
Yeah, look, a couple of comments. So what does that mean, first of all? We tested it with a few people from the region, but also important part of that was actually to test it in the markets that we're focusing on, in particular Auckland. And we ran a series of consumer sessions where you literally sit behind the glass and have facilitated sessions about what people really think about the destination. The impact of that was a bit of a change of direction on 2 or 3 elements, and reconfirm some things that we already know, such as things such as the climate is attractive, the whole destination actually is a very attractive place to live, but people have a real concern around what would they do in a work environment and other work opportunities. And actually what is the opportunities for their kids and their partner, for example, if they're coming for skilled roles. So I won't go into all the detail, but just the other thing that it did throw up was how much the market actually values some elements of our both the Nelson and the Tasman sort of lifestyle and visitor product offer that actually didn't come through quite so strong from when we talk with the local stakeholders and local business community, because I think we probably, familiarity sometimes means we don't see these things. So, and it's really simple things. So the arts community, for example, come out really strongly. Our artisan food and beverage type products, which we might not bulk altogether, but they came out really strongly and very high in the attraction side of life, alongside the likes of Able Tasman, which always, get reconfirmed. So that was what that process was about, and that's what we have fed into bringing back a final version in June.
And thank you. And just a comment and then another question, a short question. So the comment would be, thank you for that clarification, and I think it's important that what comes out of that is, you've mentioned some challenges, which I think we need to hear, so that when we do our planning to encourage business to relocate here, so the earlier the better, I think, in that case, just so that we can try. If there's anything absolutely in front of you that comes in front of you that we don't know about, that would help us with our planning to enable that to happen. That would be good. So the only question I've got left is, if our neighbours aren't forthcoming with a match for us, would you be then coming back with some recommendations of how you're going to cut the cloth with what you've got?
Perhaps if I could just add to the previous question, that one of the things that came out of the consumer testing in Auckland was the perception that Nelson wasn't so much where is it, but it's actually quite hard to get to. And I can tell you in my business travels around the country, people constantly say to me, well, can you get a direct flight to Nelson? So the whole point of particularly the consumer program and the focus of that is to identify that it is easy to get to, that it is well serviced, those sorts of things. And I think that historically that's something that's sort of been a given, and it's only consumer testing that tells you those sorts of things, which is why I guess I would have preferred that we'd done more consumer testing. The attitude of the board, Mark might have a different response to your last question, Councillor, is that as we've said when we started the new business, we will match our work profile to the funding that's available, and if we have less funding than we'd like, then we will match it accordingly.
I guess the question was, would you come back to us with some recommendations of a slight change or a major change?
I think we'll definitely need to come back with a change, and I would have thought it would be, it won't be so slight because the revenue we're looking for is significant, because it significantly enables us to do things. So I just want to be honest up front about that. But at the moment we are definitely trying to work on delivering on what we interpreted to be the expectations in the letter of expectation, plus the regional identity, particularly this first year of it. The last point I would make, and I should have explained this before, your point about what are those things that we need to be aware of to help planning. The first two investment cases we're looking to undertake, and you may recall in the presentation I made around that, that is all about absolutely understanding what drives the attraction and retention of private sector capital. And the second element is what are the things that would strengthen that private sector capital attraction environment. And it is designed so that we can provide you with really good, robust information around the investment, in particular in the food and beverage sort of technology area, and in the blue economy, i.e. marine and maritime and the aquaculture sectors, by around about January or so, hopefully early as possible, to feed into your long-term plan process. That's what the investment cases are really all about. I'd love to be able to actually cover all of the important drivers of the economy, but this is reality here. But it is absolutely about the fact that it is designed to assist as a framework for decision making about what's really important, because I realise that you have 500 really important things in the eye of the beholder, and this is about trying to be really clear. The second part of that is we can then have a consistent approach to what is really important when we engage with central government about their contribution to enabling a better investment environment, whether it's infrastructure, whether it's regulatory, whether it's program delivery. So, yeah.
Councillor Matheson.
I was staying within the realms of that theme of where to from here. Can I ask both of you just to reflect back a little bit? You earned my admiration for the job that you were given, and that was to take together two identities and others and try and wind them in together to give the city a better direction in economic and tourism, whatever. And from my observations, I think in the relatively short time that you've been going, I've been pretty impressed. Can you just give us a small commentary from both of you on how you've found the job? How have you found this monstrous task you were given from a personal point of view?
I understand the question, and without trying to be either clever or cute, I guess I didn't see it as a monstrous task, firstly. I saw it as a reasonably straightforward task of taking two existing agencies and turning them into one. What are the key elements of that? The key elements are being clear about what are the small things you have to do to ensure that when you go through a transition that everything works. That's not complicated, but it is attention to a whole range of small things. And at the other end of that, when you have an organisation, do you have the leadership and the core skill capability to deliver what your shareholders expect you to deliver? Well, I think we've done those things very well, and I've got to say, I guess we've changed the nature of the governance of the organisation in how the board works and the interaction, and that's a focus on less creation of data and more understanding what are the things that you need to do and how do you actually, how do you prioritise things to get things done. I would rate that process in terms of outcome very highly, and I do that by having a session with Mark and all of his staff and asking them specific questions about why do they come to work and hearing their responses. Very positive.
Can you give us a brief response to, please, Mark?
Yeah, look, from my perspective, it's been challenging and rewarding in a fairly short period of time. The culture, both of the organisations and bringing them together, but also the culture of the Nelson Tasman region, has been a really interesting learning curve for me, coming from a very different culture in a Rotorua context. And I think that the other one of the other challenges definitely has been to balance that visitor industry with the wider economic development and other sectorial outcomes, considering we have a very high number of visitor industry partners who are actually contributing serious money to our activities. But the last thing I would say is, you know, the two things really. The teams and a number of the key players in the visitor sector's response to a destination management type approach, where they're starting to understand that this is not all just about promoting a destination and promoting destination product. We've actually got to sell the whole destination and make sure that we take our locals with us on that journey so they become our best ambassadors, which also has a translation into a great place to live and work. So I'm quite buoyed by the response to that sort of thinking and the way that we're starting to go down that track. I can't say that it's something you can change tomorrow, but that's been pretty rewarding. And the last element is, particularly in the last few months, has started to know people, working with the likes of Lee, Rob at the airport, Marty at the port, NMIT. I really do, and Grant, since he's come into the chamber, you know, we would get together quite often. I'm really starting to get quite a cool feel of the fact that together we can really make some change that for the better, which, you know, would be useless if we were just trying to do that individually. So that would be my gut feel impression for 9 months, I think it is. And I have got one staff member who's away having a baby, nothing to do with me though.
That's nice to know. Thank you. That was good.
Thank you, Councillor Matheson. Councillor Dalberg.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, John and Mark, for your report. The first one would be on page 117. John, it's your letter to Chris Ward, and it's item 3, which is about the securing sustainable increasing financial contributions, attracting, requesting additional investments. A bit of a challenge. How do you feel that's going in the short time that you've been working on this project?
Part of the repositioning is firstly around the regional identity umbrella, and identifying, which is pretty simple actually, to identify who are the major players, and then having a proposition for them about what funding we have, what this will allow us to do, and what both we expect from them and what they can deliver. I'm going to get Mark to talk a little bit more about that. But that program, the structure of that is not quite finished, but it's just about finished to actually being implemented in a face-to-face. But if I just think about the earlier questions around the additional funding, there's no doubt in my mind that we can raise the expectation of what that will deliver with the additional funding that we're seeking. I have no doubt that that will raise that our expectation of what we should expect from our partners, simply by delivering more. I don't know whether Mark wants to talk a little bit about precisely where that's at, or whether that's sufficient to answer the question.
Yes.
Look, just so the partner program that we're working on at the moment, and actually is what I'm hoping to take, particularly to the visitors sector as a test case, actually in May at a forum that we've got coming up, is very much around a revenue or a partner program that is based on three key components. Certainly, leveraging the public investment, both at a local government level, but also at a central government level, and trying to potentially increase the level of participation from a central government perspective with our organisation because of our broader mandate. But the private sector partnership part of the partner program is we've managed to maintain, in fact increase a little bit, the level of private sector investment over the last 12 months, and the outcome of the regional identity, in my view, will have a far greater value proposition for them. And the other part of that is because the regional identity consumer program has a focus on not just the visitor attraction element, it's actually got a talent alignment to it as well, is starting to work starting to come together as a wider proposition for the likes of major companies who are looking to attract talent, because it's one of their constraints, the recruitment firms, the real estate firms, that sort of thing. So I'm pretty confident that that proposition's starting to come together quite well, but we won't be able to implement it until sort of later in the year once we've got a value proposition in place. The last part, though, is also related to a comment I made before, which is the third part of our funding program or partner program is the strategic partners. So we have spent a bit of time making sure that we are doing what we can to partner with the likes of the airport, would be the main one right now, because at the end of the day, once the capital is completed, we're a key part of actually making sure that we get the throughput. So we're very strategically aligned in how we go about that. And then that leads on to a better proposition and more joined up proposition with the likes of the Air New Zealands, the Jetsstars of this world. Similarly, conversation with the port, and we're far more engaged there around the cruise ship market, and trying to focus on what we can do to better enable that part of the market as an example. And the last one, I think, was a comment made before for Councillor Courtney's question, is also the likes of NMIT, for example, are really key partners in that as well. So that's kind of where we're at the moment. We're on the journey, but the whole point is to try and get a better balance and leverage the funding as best as possible to make the maximum impact as possible. It's not just about raising the funds. We haven't got other good things to do with it.
Yeah, it's just appreciate that comment, because that was really the leverage with partners. Appears to be the challenge. We've done it with the SUTA, doing it with the School of Music, it certainly works. My other question to you then would be page 94, number 2, which is that incubator and business hub. It's kind of it's kind of the tantalisingly thing that says we can make something happen, but a few people have tried it before. It appears to be a challenge. Probably just your thoughts on how you're going to make that successful, and can we help?
I think there's two elements in that. One is we are looking at the overall, it sounds terrible, I need a better name, but the whole business development or innovation sort of ecosystem. Who are all the players that are providing business development or innovation type services within the region, and where do they fit in a business life cycle? So that's an important context to think about. And then the second part of that is, I think you're referring a little bit to, which I think Innovate was a great start, but it was underfunded and quite narrowly focused. So we are looking at a bit more of a broader program at that startup area, where we can build a 2 to 3 year long-term sort of approach. And the second bit of that is definitely looking at both those high growth companies that would be in an incubator type environment, but also the delivery of slightly broader startup programs, which won't necessarily be for high growth companies. It'll be for people just looking to start a business and get on the journey, and giving them the best tools available to be able to have a shot at being successful or not in that environment. So there's a number of programs around in that space, and those two things work together, but they are quite separate. And the former programs sort of targeted at different bits of that, but there was no follow-on, no real program instead of, so it was a project, not a program. And so the approach with, particularly with the likes of NMIT engaged in this, is actually to ensure that we do have a program with a cycle that actually gives the customer both an impetus at the start, but also some support mechanism as it moves through. So the last part I would say is the proposal that we are looking at is partnering with an organisation called Creative HQ out of Wellington. They've been doing this and run some quite successful incubator programs for 12 years. So the concept of not needing to do it all ourselves and partnering with them and learning from their experiences and some of their skills and knowledge and networks is, in my view, a really sensible way to get the best outcome from a Nelson Tasman perspective. So that's sort of where we're at right now.
Appreciate it. Thanks for your comment. That was good.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. We're not making any decisions today as to your $200,000. The process is that we do have to do this through our annual plan considerations, as does Tasman. I hope that your visits to Murchison, Motueka and Golden Bay were noted by our neighbours and that they look favourably upon the potential that there is in their region to be benefiting from what our partnership is doing. So we have in front of us today a recommendation. Would you like to move? You wish to move it? Mm-hmm. The recommendation that Councillor Dalberg is moving is on page 78 of the agenda, and you'll note that it has a note outlining the fact that we do have to do this in conjunction with our neighbours, and that means we do it during our annual plan considerations. Do I have a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Rutledge. Is there any further discussion? I wouldn't think so. There's not. I'll put that all in favour. Please say aye. Aye. Against, no. Carried. Thank you very much indeed for coming and the comprehensive, informative reports. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. I thought I should perhaps take this opportunity to answer a question of either 1 or 2 meetings ago from Councillor Courtney, where I didn't set out to be obtuse, but and I think the question was directed to my role and tenure, and I have had some discussion with my board, and subject to the normal processes of both evaluation and reappointment, I have indicated to my board that I would be prepared to continue for a further 2 years.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. We'll now move to item 10, NOMAC report, page 118, and welcome to the desk, Rob and Lee. Report preparer. Any corrections or changes?
Through the chair, no.
So I'm looking at this stage for someone to move the recommendation on page 118. It's moved by Councillor Skinner, seconded by Councillor Courtney. We, as you will be aware, are going to be dealing with this in the confidential section. So I'm going to put that motion. All in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against, no. It's carried. We have received the report as per the recommendation. And we now have item number 11 to deal with, which indicates that Mr. Rob Gunn and Mr. Lee Babe may remain in the chamber for the public excluded section. I'm sorry, Annie, but this means that you have to leave. And I hope that you've enjoyed your time here and learnt a little bit about how civic affairs work. And it's very complex, you've probably realised. Is there anything else you'd like to say about what you've seen today?
It was very good. I've never been to one of these meetings, but I think it's really good.
Thank you. It's lovely to have you here. Now, would someone like to move the recommendation to go into... Councillor Courtney's moved it. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Dahlberg.
Mr Chair, I just wonder whether we should be attending to the recommendation in the open meeting.
We've done that.
Did I miss that?
Yes, you did. Yeah.
You're so efficient.
Yes, that's fine.
Tim Skinner and Courtney.
Did you?
Please remain attentive, Councillor Matheson.
I'll try
So
to stay
I'm
awake.
going to put the motion, which has been moved and seconded, that the public be excluded. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against, no. Carried. We are now moving to our blue papers. Yes, yes.